Welcome again, everyone, to ELPCO September 2021 meeting. We took a summer break, taking July and August off, but we're back in September and October and potentially in November if enough issues come up that we've got to talk about. As we're all here, I just want to mention a couple of events. One is we hope everyone had a great time at the 9th and 9th Street Festival last weekend. We had a little dicey weather setting up. It looked like it was going to rain all day and high winds, but lo and behold, the sun came out and it was a beautiful afternoon. Everything dried off like it does in Utah, and we had some great crowds. So thanks for everyone on the ELPCO board and our volunteers that helped out with that. We had Salt Lake City Police running a bike rodeo on the west side of that, so thanks to them for that and all those that helped out. I also want to mention that we have next week a debate for the District 5 race for Salt Lake City Council, and that will be happening on Wednesday night, September 29th at 7 o'clock. It'll be just like this. It'll be an online webinar. We will be broadcasting from Salt Lake Community College, right in ELPCO in District 5. Actually not in ELPCO, and actually close to Ballpark Liberty Wells, but close enough. And that'll be 7 o'clock. The link to that is available on the ELPCO Facebook page, and we'll put it out in our newsletters as well. So watch for that coming up next Wednesday, the 29th. Ballots go out the week of October 11th. So we're trying to get that to you guys a little bit early so you have that information to make your mind up. Okay, fire department is here. Let me give them the floor. Fire department, you are allowed to talk. So you can unmute and give us your update.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us here this evening. My name is Brian Meyer. I am a captain here at station number 5. And I'm joined here by Chris Breuer, who is one of our new apprentice firefighters. And we're going to let him stretch his wings a little bit tonight and let him give you an update on some things that are going on this month in the fire department.
All right, so some highlights of what the department is focusing on right now. As you may know, September is National Preparedness Month. We're asking the community to make a plan with your family and friends for what you will do in the event of an emergency. Gather supplies and build a kit for what you might need during an emergency. Instructions for where to start and what you would want to include can be found on the city's website, slc.gov, under the emergency management section. And additional information and advice can be found at ready.gov and slcfire.com. Make sure to gather and secure your important documents in case you need to take them with you. And be sure to educate your kids on the plan of action so they know what to do should the time come. It's cooling off quickly this time of year. We ask that the community be proactive in cleaning dust and debris from in and around fireplaces and heating appliances to minimize fire danger. And in our ongoing response to the COVID pandemic, firefighters will continue to wear masks when out in public, and public activities such as station tours and school visits remain suspended.
Do you have any questions for us this evening?
Anybody have questions for Salt Lake City Fire Department? You can put them in the Q&A if you've got them from our attendees, or any of our panelists have some questions.
Other than that, if nobody has any questions, you can always go to saltlakeCityFire.com, and there's many resources there. You should be able to find the answers to any questions that you've got. Also, the new hire list is open on Salt Lake City's webpage. So if you know anybody that may be interested in becoming a firefighter, please let them know. They can go online, submit their interest form, and then testing will start in the spring, likely April.
Okay, thank you, Salt Lake City Fire Department. Sometimes people ask why we have them go first in our meetings, and it's literally because they can be running out the door to go fight a fire or do something. We've had ELPCO meetings where they've been in the middle of their presentation and they get the call and they all just run. So that's why we do it that way. I want to just take a step back though and welcome everyone to the ELPCO September meeting. We've taken a couple months off, so it's great to see everyone. In 2D, hey, it's better than not seeing you, right? Hopefully we'll be back in 3D and in person at some point, but we felt that this was the safest way to run a meeting this fall based on conditions right now. We have a really interesting agenda tonight. We have several elected officials from representing Salt Lake City here. I just want to mention them just right off the bat. We'll get into that in a second, but we've got Councilmember Darren Mono from Salt Lake City District 5. We've got Representative Joel Briscoe from the Legislature from the House, District 25. Senator Derek Kitchen from District 2. Thanks, Senator. And Mohammed Bayed, representing the Salt Lake City Board of Education Precinct 5. Not District 5, it's Precinct 5. Those things are important. So thank you all for being here. We had invited Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall. She had to cancel a couple days ago. We hope to have her for our October meeting, which will be October 28th, I believe. So we're still working on that schedule. We'll get to our elected officials in just a little bit. We want the bulk of the meeting devoted there, but let's head over to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Detective Nathan Meinzer is our liaison, person who helps us out a lot. So Detective Meinzer, would you like me to throw up that chart, or do you want to do an introduction first?
If you'd go ahead and throw it up, let me just introduce myself, and then we'll be good to go. So I'm Detective Meinzer. I currently cover Districts 4 and 5. My role is I work with the community and businesses to get your concerns to the right people. And then on top of that, I try to work on long-term problems that can't seem to be solved with an easy process. So I kind of try and help brainstorm and get the right people in the right place.
Great. I will go ahead and start sharing that screen. All right. Can you see that, Detective?
Yes, I can.
Do you want to let folks know what this is and sort
absolutely.
of walk through it?
Yeah. So every single month, I pull these stats for specifically the ELPCO neighborhood. I pull up just those boundaries and I send that information to Jason, and he's really awesome. So he pulls it together in a big spreadsheet, and we track every single thing throughout the whole entire year. So if you look at this here, we have it in order of the biggest issue throughout each month. So the top 5 items that we're looking at here is car prowls, traffic reportable accidents, non-reportable traffic accidents, mental health issues, and then simple assaults. So it's kind of nice to be able to look at each month and kind of compare ourselves previously. It kind of gives us that understanding of, what can we do better, or what can we kind of focus on? So if you go ahead and take us to the next next slide. So we wanted to highlight here that the trespassing. So this is from January to September. So as you can see, slowly over time this year, we have had increases in trespassing. So I did want to say, if you are noticing people trespassing on your property or on your business, please be sure to give us a call. Call our dispatch, non-emergency number. Please give good descriptions. So a pro tip is they do not change their shoes. So some people will have multiple sets of clothing with them, and if they're doing things that are legal, sometimes it will change, but typically no one carries extra shoes. So that's kind of like a good little indicator. Go to the next slide, please. So the next one here is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. So across the nation, we've been experiencing an increase in domestic violence. So this specific stat is the non-criminal. So what that means is a partnership where there's either verbal altercation, yelling, things like that. So this is non-physical. And as you can see throughout 2021, we are also increasing on that. So I did want to mention that if you are having any partner violence, if you don't feel comfortable speaking with police, there are hotlines out there. The Utah Domestic Violence Link line is actually 1-800-897-LINK. Please watch out for your neighbors. And if you know anyone that has any issues, if you feel comfortable talking to police about it, we're here. And if you don't feel comfortable, there are non-police options. So watch out for your neighbors. Thank you. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So last but not least, this one kind of lets us compare the beginning of the year to the later part of the year. And we can kind of see what change we have in those numbers. So when you look at like the car prowls, it's down from earlier in the year. And then the other items are kind of going up. So this is very helpful to kind of look at what's up versus what's down. So I do want to mention that all of our stats are online on our website at slcpd.com. We go into very extreme detail. And if you ever have questions and want to go into more detail, you can talk to myself. I'm sure Jason would be happy to talk to you as well. And then also on our also on our website is our bike registration. I did want to point that one out as well. So if you have a bicycle, odds are you probably don't know the serial number. I didn't know my serial number until I reported it online to get it registered. It's free to do online with our department. Highly recommend it. Do we have any questions for me at this time?
Doesn't look like any have come in through the Q&A. Any of our panelists have questions for Detective Meinzer? Well, Detective, if you keep sending me that raw data, I'll keep turning it into those charts. So thank you for doing that. And again, this is ELPCO specific data. The data you can get on the CompStat website for Salt Lake City Police is District 5, which covers 5 community councils, a little bit more. And so we're really appreciated that we can drill down and find out exactly what's going on within ELPCO. And the one thing I would say about that last slide is it includes about 20 days in September, which is in the first half only includes 4 months. So it's like 4 months compared to 4.5 months. So, you know, those numbers might be a little bit squiggly in terms of some of the increases. Generally, you just look at the broad trends right there. So great. No more questions for Detective Meinzer. Let's check the Q&A. Folks can use that to go ahead as our attendees want to ask questions. That's great. Okay. Well, appreciate your help, Detective, and thanks for coming to our meeting tonight. Tim Cosgrove is up next, representing the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office. Tim, go ahead. Please give us an update from City Hall.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate being here. You're always so organized, Jason. Thanks for setting up this event tonight. And thanks for your invitation. I want to apologize, and the mayor extends her most sincere apologies for the unforeseen conflict tonight in missing the meeting with East Liberty Park community. She is looking forward to meeting with you next month on October 28th and visiting with you at that time. Just a few items I wanted to share. You're aware that the mayor used her executive powers of the office of the mayor to issue the order requiring the mask to be worn for K through 12 in Salt Lake City. The mayor had reported that to the city council, that COVID rates are still on the rise, as well as in the state, and the hospital ICUs are nearly full. And so with that, the council approved extending the mayor's August 20th proclamation, declaring that local emergency to COVID. And with that emergency declaration, it extended it for 30 days subsequent with the mask order mandate for K through 12 as well. This week, the mayor and the Salt Lake City RDA released $8 million to increase the number of affordable residential housing units being constructed. So this goes to assist our homeless services outreach and extending more affordable housing throughout the city. The RDA is going to be putting on a virtual meeting on September 24th. And if you're interested in attending, you just fill out the form with your interest, and I'll put that application into the chat. And proposals for that funding are due by the end of October. So watch that closely. In addition, right now, the Salt Lake City Capital Improvement Program, the CIP funding, is also accepting applications. This is a very popular funding source. I always say it's grassroots at its finest because it's initiated by constituent request. So this is for the fiscal year 2022-2023 CIP funding, and that application process began September 1st, and you have available to apply until September 30th. And those capital improvement projects go from a minimum of $50,000 to $500,000, $500,000. So that's an exciting opportunity. What else? Oh, the tiny home. There's a tiny home design competition. I announced at a few community councils. I don't know if that information, because it's been a while since ELPCO met was passed on through, but it's a unique opportunity with the partnership from Salt Lake City and the American Institute of Architects to come up with a design for tiny homes. And there's a list of criteria that's included online, but there's money, cash prizes awarded up to, I think it was $1,000. And that's also due at the end of October. So if that's something that you're interested in, let your creativity ideas flow. And I will put that link to access that information in the chat. I did get a notice from Salt Lake County Animal Services that they've also provided an amnesty for late license fee forgiveness for pets. So if you didn't license your pet, and we all care about our pets, our dogs or cats, want to get them licensed, they have an amnesty forgiveness that you can still register until the end of October. There was one more thing. I'm trying to think of, oh, leaves. With fall, the leaf collection that you can request your extra compost cans for fall leaves. We ask residents not to rake or blow leaves into the street or gutters. It's bad for stormwater. You know, that's from the floods that we had last year and icing problems. So if you are interested and want additional compost bins, you can request up to 2 additional compost bins to help with the fall leaf collection. And I think that's all I had on those 6 items, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Jason.
Any questions for Tim Cosgrove for the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office? From our panelists, from our audience members? I don't see anything coming through. I did want to, oh, okay, someone actually just put in a question about for the later on. That's great. Thank you for doing that, Jared. Tim, I just wanted to mention something sort of in addition to the CIP capital improvement project. ELPCO is actually putting together a program to provide some micro grants to members of our community as well. It's not going to be quite on the scale of the capital improvement program budget, but that is something that we hope to launch in the new year. And so I want to kind of mention that as something that we are trying to emulate, trying to do within our neighborhood. And so watch for more news on that. We have a committee of board members that are working on it, including Ann Weaver, our treasurer, who's on the call right now. So just wanted to preview that.
That sounds really nice. That's exciting. I'd be happy to work with you on that.
Yeah, you know, I need a new boat, so I think I'm going to apply. That's my reason. No, but that we'll announce that in the fall. So thank you. Thank you, Tim, for the update. And we do hope to see the mayor, if not in October, then sometime soon here in East Liberty Park. She does live in ELPCO, you know, so we're home territory. So we'd love to have her attend and talk about a lot of things that have been going on in city.
She loves ELPCO. She loves our community. Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim. And we're ahead of schedule. And please do keep sending those questions in through the Q&A. And we've got some prepared questions, but we also want to lean on our audience, our attendees, and go forward from there and be a little bit more dynamic. What I'd like to do now, though, is get right to the heart of the meeting, which is hearing from our elected officials. What I said at the beginning was, you know, as each of you I introduced, if you could describe who you are, what you represent. Sometimes people get confused, House, Senate, you know, City Council, what it all means. So just kind of give us a landscape there. And then I'll ask you a question, and then we'll move on to the next one. And so everyone will get a chance to speak early, and then we'll hopefully create this kind of dialogue with our audience and amongst each other as we move through it. So Darren, you're up first, and then Senator Kitchen, Derek, you're on deck, just to let you know. And then we'll go to Joel, and then we'll go to Mohammed. But Darren, could you introduce yourself a little bit? And then I've got a question for you.
Great. Yeah, Darren Mono. I represent District 5 on the Salt Lake City Council. It stretches from ELPCO and a little tiny pocket further east of ELPCO, all the way over to the ballpark neighborhood, which starts at the freeway. So it's a pretty east-west, pretty wide district, and it goes from about 9th South to 21st South. The Salt Lake City government has a strong mayor form of government, which means that it's an executive branch And then the Salt Lake City Council is the legislative branch, and we are essentially in charge of budget and policy. So any choosing where the money, the taxpayers' money goes is under our purview, as well as setting the laws. And we're a 7-person legislative body. So in order to move forward any law, we need 4 council members to agree to it.
Great, thanks for that introduction, Darren. Here's the first question, and actually echo some of the questions that have been coming in on the Q&A. We've received at ELPCO numerous complaints about the violent incidents and encampments in Liberty Park, especially trending within the past couple of weeks. This tends to happen every fall. Seems a little bit more intense in terms of the response we're getting this year. So since the problems don't seem to be resolved right now, they don't seem to be getting better, what efforts are you or the City Council going to be taking to do that? Do you need help from other agencies within city government or state government to do this? Or is it just the fact that we need more time for the current projects or current interventions to work? You've been very involved in the issue. What can you tell us, especially about people who want to see results?
Yeah, Jason, I appreciate the question. That's very important right now. I'm getting a lot of input about this. And I think the answer to your question is both of those things. There are probably new things that we haven't thought of yet that we need to do, but there's also, we just need a little bit more time. So the major takeaway for me right now is that we just need to hire more police officers back. We have currently 97. So the chief gave us an update on Tuesday that there's 51 open positions for officers. But if you add that to the 46 officers that are still in training that have been recently hired, there's actually 97 officers that are not on the streets responding to calls. And that makes it difficult for instance, our Parks Bike Squad to do the work that they're doing. So there is a dedicated Parks Bike Squad. There's 6 people on that total. And they are charged with maintaining or patrolling all of the parks. Unfortunately, 6 people that work 4 days a week, because of course they do get some time off, doesn't mean that our parks are getting patrolled very often, because there's over 100 parks in the city. So that's something where the City Council is currently looking at additional resources, perhaps something similar to the Downtown Ambassadors program, but dedicated to parks. We also have, we've been adding social workers to the police department, and there may be a model where social workers go out with firefighters, or social workers go with the police. And we're looking at a lot of different models to sort of take care of a lot of the issues that we're seeing, both in parks, but on our streets as well. And hopefully take some of the burden off of the police department. So that's something that we have been discussing and that we're continuing to discuss. And so I think those discussions need to continue happening, but also we need to, of course, just the chief, we've increased the salaries for police departments. So in some cases, it was a 30% increase, which is unheard of for any kind of government position. And Salt Lake City police officers should now be the highest paid police department in the state, which, if you ask me, they should have been that way all the time. But they now have that funding, so the chief is desperately trying to hire those officers back. I think there are some more immediate sort of strategies, policing strategies. So once it gets down to that level, it's more of a police department thing. And I don't know if Detective Meinzer's able to share anything specific, but he and I have had lots of conversations recently. And Detective, if you're still here, is there anything you wanted to add in terms of what's happening at Liberty Park?
Yeah, thank you. I was just responding in the chat to answer the question to Meadow, just so I'll kind of hit at both. So Liberty Park is just outside the ELPCO area, and so that did not get on those stats specifically. But what I can share about the stats for Liberty Park is, since the 1st of this month until today, there were a total of 27 police officer reports written there. For the calls for service, there were a total of 112 calls for service. So of those, there were 89 of them that were founded, which means that officers responded and were able to handle the issue then and there. There were 15 that would require additional follow-up, which means that there were cases that detectives have to do follow-up to go forward from. And then there were a total of 23 of them that were completely unfounded. So that's kind of a snapshot look at it. So the police department, what we have been doing is every 2 weeks we meet with our administration. So our chiefs get together and our captains are assigned divisions. So Captain Lewis is actually the captain that is over the Liberty Division where Liberty Park falls in. And he's responsible for what we are doing there. So what we have done is we've reached out to, so not only do we have our park squad, but we also have our Liberty Bike Squad and our Central Bike Squad that have been trying to do extra work there. We also have reached out to our gang enforcement squad as well as our organized crimes. On top of that, to try and create more bodies, because there has been a lot of public outcry, but these things have all been taking place before we've gotten a lot of this recent outcry. But now that people are kind of reaching out and trying to work with us, we want to do everything we can to be transparent. So right now we're requesting some extra overtime, trying to reallocate some of our overtime funds to get more operations inside the park to do what we can to deter a lot of these issues. So specifically when it comes to the camping in the park, we're going to try to target the curfew ordinance there. Because right now we're trying to be very understanding with camping and we're trying to find a solution with the city, with the council, trying to have a unified approach there. So with that in mind, we're going to try and identify other areas that we can focus on. So right now, the big focus with our bike squads is a lot of like the drug dealing that's being reported, the fighting, things like that. So that's kind of the response from the police department that we're working on the park. If that kind of is a good summary, I guess. There's a lot more going on, but trying to summarize it all and not take too much time is kind of hard.
Detective. One more thing I'll add in. I know we need to move on to the next question, I'm sure, but I've had a lot of conversations about safety in the district, but specifically in Liberty Park. And the conversations that are the most helpful to me are when people have ideas of how to improve the park. And so I had a conversation today, half-hour phone conversation with a gentleman that lives in ELPCO and said, you know, we can look at parking enforcement. We can look at there's, you know, a lot of booths that are set up for people selling things. I know that there's the Liberty Wells Farmer Market, but there's just always sort of vendors there and making sure that those people are licensed. And so there's some specific tasks, and I was able to take that list and formulate a letter. And I don't know if we're working on sending it over to Kristen Riker, who's the director of the new Parks Department. And so if there are specific ideas of things that we can do, I can always ask the administration for some advice, or I can tell you, you know, this is something we've already discussed and it didn't work because of this, but those are things that are really helpful. I had a conversation recently in the last week or so with someone that said, look, why don't we expand the role of the Parks Department to include recreation services like Little League and things like that, so that the parks are used more often and there's more programming in them, and that will naturally make the park safer. I love those kinds of conversations. So if there's anything like that, I'm always open to that kind of a discussion.
Great, thank you, Darren. I think we will move on to our next elected official, but when we circle back to this issue, I think we probably want to focus on camping and sort of not necessarily the personnel issues with the police department, but what are maybe some of the policies that we might need to address within the city? Because if you have all the people in the world, but you can't enforce certain laws, then you can't make some changes. So, but I want to move on to Senator Kitchen. Derek, thanks for being here. The first question I had for you actually is a little bit related to this, and it has to do with the relationship between Salt Lake City and the legislature. You served on the Salt Lake City Council, and now you're in the legislature. You've seen it from both sides. Can be a testy and sometimes toxic relationship, and we've seen that in the past couple of months, particularly around COVID issues. What can be done to kind of make that relationship better? So that Salt Lake City doesn't end up being the punching bag for state lawmakers who want to, get popular in their districts.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's great to be with everybody today. Derek Kitchen here. I'm in the Utah State Senate, and my district encompasses all of this community council, but it stretches beyond this as well through the avenues in Capitol Hill all the way up Immigration Canyon. And many of the issues that you've outlined already to me and what I've heard so far are applicable, district-wide. The issue with the Utah legislature and the relationship between elected officials at the state capitol and within the city has always been a little bit, there's always been some tension there. Obviously, it depends on who's in the White House and who controls Congress. That oftentimes determines which issues become elevated and hyper politicized. Right now, obviously, it happens to be masks, masking and the response to COVID. But not too long ago, it was the issue of the inland port, and then before that, it was the issue of the prison, and it just one issue after another. And so certainly this is a relationship that I've been really focused on cultivating with leaders on the Republican majority within both the House and the Senate. I think the key is just to try and soften the edges around this relationship whenever possible. And that means finding common ground on issues that are not related specifically to Salt Lake necessarily, but maybe where we have a shared vision. One thing that I have found is that, when you have a Republican supermajority and oftentimes decisions are made behind closed doors, it's really critical for elected officials like Representative Briscoe and myself to insert ourselves preemptively in some of the process and to make sure that we are being proactive in picking up the phone and calling President Adams or Speaker Brad Wilson or some of the other key decision makers on the Republican side. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, a third of the state's population live in Salt Lake County, and Salt Lake City is the largest, most densely populated city in the entire state of Utah. And so, and of course, we're the capital city, right? So certainly there are unique needs that we have that just simply won't, those values won't be shared necessarily with legislative leaders if they're from Mapleton or Washington County or up north, right? And so I think, one thing that I've really tried to do is cultivate a relationship with local elected officials at the county and at the city level. So that goes to Darren Mano and Muhammad here and all of their colleagues in their respective bodies. It's really important that as leaders and elected officials at various levels of government that represent Salt Lake City, that we are a tight group, and that perhaps we won't always agree on issues, or maybe we have small disagreements around the edges. But at the end of the day, we need to be in good collaboration with one another and making sure that we're amplifying each other's voice and supporting our priorities, because at the end of the day, a priority of mine is likely a priority of Councilmember Mano's, because we represent the same people. Same for Representative Briscoe. And so I think this information sharing dynamic is really critical. And again, cultivating that sense of camaraderie and building a team for Salt Lake City. Because there will be times that we've got to go fight, and we won't be on the same side as the Republican majority, and we've got to be a team. And so I think that's really key, is just collaborate as much as possible. And the same goes, like, we have a bunch of federal dollars coming through the state that will be dispersed downward to counties and cities throughout the whole state of Utah. To mitigate issues relating to COVID, but also perhaps relating to infrastructure, depending on what Congress does in the next few weeks. So I think, as we identify those priorities for our community, it's important that we, again, are amplifying each other's efforts. And I think that, it's not that this has ever been a real problem, but I think that there are opportunities for us to double down on our investments in each other as elected officials. And I feel like my relationship with my peers on this call are really good, and others as well. And so I think that that's my big strategy in working with the legislature.
Great, thanks for that answer. And it sounds like those relationships could lead to conversations, which could lead to like early warnings that things are coming up, right? So that we're not blindsided in the capital city by something happening, but we can work before it becomes public or before it becomes real.
Absolutely.
Cool, thank you, Senator. And sorry I didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself. You did that nicely there. Let me switch over now to Representative Joel Briscoe. Joel, could you introduce yourself and your role? And then I've got a question for you.
Sure. Joel Briscoe, Utah House of Representatives, District 25. There are 75 members of the House, 29 members of the Senate. And come November 2022, those 75 people will be elected from different districts. You should all get involved in the redistricting process. Can I just say, just before your question, on the Salt Lake City Mayor mask order, congratulations and thank you to Darren and the City Council for supporting another 30-day extension. I've heard some news broadcasters in Salt Lake City say that they've spoken to attorneys who say what the mayor did was illegal. This is poppycock and nonsense. I have spoken to 2 attorneys at the Utah Legislature who participated in a phone call several weeks ago before the mayor issued the order with the city's mayor attorney, and they tell me what the mayor did was legal. That when the legislature discussed this legislation, they discussed writing mayors out of it, but decided they should not. Some of them don't like it. I think if they had a legal leg to stand on, they would have taken on the city already. So when you turn on the news and hear talking heads say, well, a probably illegal order by the mayor of Salt Lake City, that's just so much crap. I'm really, sorry, I'm getting cranky, but based on your question to Senator, Kitchen about us, and sometimes I think they just tape that kick me sign on the back of us and we just need to rip it off.
Got it. Well, thank you. Thank you, Joel, for that. It is interesting. It seems like there's been more controversial mandates that have come from even Washington, D.C. that have got their attention. So the Salt Lake City one is now old news. I've got a question about water for you, Joel. I know that's an issue that you follow. I know there's a saying in the West, what whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. Probably stole that line from you in your answer, but water is an issue that occasionally comes up. Now with our drought situation, even more so, Salt Lake City enjoys some extensive water rights and watershed rights heading up the canyons, going back, more miles than you even think. I don't think it's 100 miles, but it definitely is pretty far back. And every once in a while, the landowners up there or with the state behind them try to steal them. It happened in 2017. It almost happened in 2018 with a bill from Mike Noel from Southern Utah. With the drought intensifying, I can imagine that Salt Lake City's watershed is even more coveted by folks in this state. What can you tell us about that? It's a long-term issue. It's not right in front of us, but what can we do now to prepare? And what is happening that you're seeing at the legislature?
So the question I'm looking at, you sent out several days ago, should we be worried that other cities or the state will come after our water? Yes, 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 and yes. So last Wednesday at Natural Resources, state senators suggested the solution to Utah's water problems is bringing water from the Missouri River Basin and piping it over the Rocky Mountains. Back in the 50s and 60s, Utah and Arizona were going to get water by bringing it down from Columbia River. I spoke to someone who works for the State Division of Natural Resource Offices last Tuesday, who told me independently of their office that they did not support some people in Utah developed a plan to divert Snake River water into Utah. And he spoke to his compatriots, his peers in Idaho. So what are you people down there in Utah doing? He said, it's not me, but they plan to build this canal and pull it into the Bear River and then bring it down to the Great Salt Lake. And they said, well, you do that because we have another canal. We're going to take it out of the Bear River and bring it back into the Snake. So this is what people will not do, is say, maybe we should change our relationship with water. Maybe we should use less water. Maybe instead of building more dams, which will simply evaporate more water because because we're having hotter summers, which we saw this summer, maybe we should store it underground like they're doing in Arizona. Build up the aquifers, clean up the water. We're going to get less snow. Dams are great if you have snow. We're getting less snow. We're getting more rain. Rain doesn't fill reservoirs. So we have to be constantly on guard for preventing overdevelopment of Mill Creek, Little Cottonwood, Big Cottonwood, Parleys. We have to be constantly on the guard to prevent that. It's been the 11 years I've been in the legislature, it's been an issue every single year and will continue to be an issue for as far as we can see. 40% of the water we drink and use in Salt Lake City comes out of those canyons every single year. And it's pretty high quality water. If we allow development and people put lawns up there and put fertilizer on the lawns and overload it with phosphorus, it's going to be an absolute mess. So high priority for me. Everyone needs to pay attention. Please conserve.
So Joel, you see future attempts in the state to come and reduce Salt Lake City's authority over its watershed. We beat them back in the past. Is it going to be harder in the future?
One of the issues is that some of the watershed is outside Salt Lake City's jurisdictional boundaries. This goes back to your question to Senator Kitchen. There are another 15, 20, 30 cities in Utah that have watershed rights to protect their water outside their own boundaries. But they only talk about us because we're the big kid on the block and we're the capital city. So yeah, we need to be ever vigilant.
Got it. Okay. Well, we'll watch for that. Maybe coming up in the legislative session. We know that sometimes as a community council, we collaborate with Salt Lake City to do lobbying on when those bills happen. Mohammed Bayed, thank you for being here from the Salt Lake City Board of Education. Please introduce yourself, and then I've got a quick question for you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Bayed, and I'm a Salt Lake City School District Precinct 5. I always say district, so, you know, potatoes, tomatoes, all good, yeah. And I represent the district that goes all the way from 1300 East all the way down to Jordan River. And it takes a little bit of a little bit of 900 south down to 21st. So, and we have 8 schools in our district. And the schools are like, we have East High School, Emerson, Hawthorne, Innovations, Horizonte, Instructional Center, Riley, Liberty, and Whittier. So we got quite a bit of schools in our district. And so, and as you all know, our schools, we have 24,000+ students. And so, yeah, that's about me.
Thank you, Mohammed. And I just want to let folks know that if you do put a question into the Q&A, our panelists are answering those. They're writing back, sometimes individually, sometimes to the whole group. So if you've got questions, this is a great chance to actually interact with your elected officials. Folks are typing away here as we're having this meeting. So feel free to do that. And we can also bring these questions up within the discussion. For instance, someone wanted us to thank the mayor's office, so Tim, and then also the school board for having a mask mandate here in the Salt Lake City School District. So wanted to pass that along from the Q&A. But Mohammed, my question is kind of about that. How are things going in the Salt Lake City School District? You're probably got your finger on the pulse of that. As a board member, I know you have children in the district. How's the mask mandate going? How are things feeling in the schools that you're visiting and learning about?
Well, it's actually really going well. Thank goodness thus far we have seen 0 complaints or protests against masks basically in front of schools. And the other amazing thing too is like the compliance of students, and their parents as well, wearing masks, while they are at school grounds. We have parents who are not wearing masks, when they are outdoor, but we are not interfering in any way to tell them, hey, you have to wear masks or so. And this actually goes along with the fact that legislators, took that authority from the school board to enforce mask mandate. But thankful that Mayor Erin Mendenhall was able to come up with that policy. And as a result of that, we were able to respect and follow the policy from Mayor Erin Mendenhall. And but the enforcement still, it's not in our hands. We can go ahead and tell people to go ahead and wear masks when they're at school, but if someone is not wearing masks, we're not going to go and say, hey, you have to wear a mask or you're out of here. So that's what we are doing right now. But it's been like so fantastic, actually. Students are back to school, parents are involved, in any way possible. They are not able to volunteer inside schools, but I've seen like teachers being very creative in making sure the students as well are involved in the process of, assisting in classes and so. And also, in terms of students who have like some health issues, they are actually, when they present something showing that they really, cannot wear masks, then they are exempt from wearing masks in schools. But overall, it could be worse. I'm so grateful for what the mayor has done. And I'm so proud actually of the team that I'm with to make sure that we go ahead and follow, on that order. And that's been good so far. So, and also we do have a virtual academy, and that's like something that Salt Lake City has started. And virtual academy, when we started, we were hoping we'd have about, a couple dozen or so students in there. But when we opened the door, then we are like a little over 200 enrollees in that virtual academy. And it has, students from our districts and from outside of our districts as well.
Great, thank you, Mohammed. I did want to follow up with one quick question. I know that the mayor reached out to the school board to ask them to back her mask ban right before she introduced it. It sounds like you supported it, but the school board decided to pass on that. Can you explain why that happened and sort of, the mechanics of that, or have opinions changed on the board based on what's been happening over the past month?
Yeah, and it was like a pretty tricky part because I 100% supported and still support what Mayor Erin Mendenhall did. And why didn't the school board publicly go and provide a public support? Because the board was trying to avoid a violation of a state law. And the state law prohibits us schools from enforcing anything that pertains to mask mandate and shutting down schools or so. And so that is the reason why. However, it was good that, there are a few members of my team who actually verbally supported her in her decision. And I wished, we would go in as a board, but also we had to make sure that we are not violating or breaking the state law in this case here. And we were able to follow the law that is presented by the city. And that was fantastic, actually.
Great, thanks for that explanation. And yeah, here we are now a month on, looking at the data. In fact, there's an excellent article in the Salt Lake Tribune today by Aaron Alberti, looking at the major school districts in Salt Lake County and tracking the data on terms of COVID cases among children in those districts. Her conclusion is that the data is a mess and you really can't tell what's going on within the districts, especially because of the reporting differences and delays. We posted that on the ELPCO Facebook page. Definitely check it out. Might be for subscribers only, but it will, this is data that we'll be looking at ELPCO because Emerson School in our district actually had one of the higher caseloads in Salt Lake City for a couple of weeks. And we hope that the school district and the county develop some better metrics for figuring out what's going on. But thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome. And if I may just add to the Emerson issue. So for a school to go into a test to stay, it has to have a little over 2%, I would say, or 6%, 2%. And so for Emerson, we had to have 30 active cases before a school can go into test to stay. Now, what had happens, it is a pretty complicated process. Unfortunately, it is a lengthy process. Let's say a student is tested positive, and so the parents will call the school. And once the school receives the message, then it goes to the nurse of the school, who will contact the health department, and then the health department will generate the letter, which will come back to school. Then it'll go out to the parents within that class. So it is pretty lengthy process. And when there are holidays and weekends, that actually really affects how long it'll take for the letter to come out to the parents.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. We're all learning this new system. We just think are thankful that our kids are mostly in school these days. So it's a good thing. I want to circle back to Darren and actually involve the whole group, because I think this is a question that also involves the state legislature. And appreciate Darren and other panelists have been answering questions on the Q&A. That's been very helpful, I think. It involves the proposal for an overflow shelter in the ballpark community of District 5. It's not in ELPCO. It's actually over kind of near where the Target and the Tesla service center is on 300 West. It's Brooklyn Avenue. It's in the ballpark neighborhood. There was a big sort of issue going on with the state legislature about basically taking an existing shelter, a detox center run by the VOA, and turning it into an overflow shelter. It was chosen, I believe, by the Salt Lake, it was recommended by the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. And then, but it's technically a private transaction as well, using state funds. Got really messy, Darren, and with the executive
it's still very messy.
Committee. Yeah, so Darren, could you give us an update on that? And specifically, the question is that neighborhoods like Ballpark feel that they are bearing the burden of a lot of different programs and centers addressing homelessness and other social issues. Salt Lake City as a city is doing that as well. What can the city council, and also in consultation with the state legislature, do to spread some of the burden and make sure that other cities and communities are doing their part? I don't want to necessarily go back and revisit what happened with the VOA Center, but I want to talk about going forward. You know, what is gonna, is this kind of is this the way it's going to be in the future, or are the systems going to change to make things work better?
Well, I hope not. This is something that the council's been every meeting I've had over the last 2 weeks we've touched on this exact question. And I think the mayor's statement, the statement that Anna Valdemoros, Councilmember Valdemoros, and myself signed on to, I hope are the first steps in sending a message that, look, Salt Lake City is no longer able to accept more of these services because of the neighborhood burdens, and specifically in specific parts of Salt Lake City. I think the entire point of the scattered sites model, when Rio Grande was shut down and we created the new homeless resource centers, was to spread those resources out so that the impacts were not multiplied on one neighborhood. And the Brooklyn Avenue site is really smack dab in the middle of the youth shelter, the King, and the Miller Center. So to me, that's a big concern, that it's multiplying those same resources. And I mean, people will argue that it's still a little bit more scattered, and it's not 1,200 beds. It would be 530 beds total or something like that. But I mean, we're seeing a lot of the neighborhood impacts. And so from a council perspective, the only things that we could do would be to completely remove that use from our zoning ordinance, or to try and amend the conditional use. And there's some timing issues because land use ordinances take quite a while to get through the system. But there's potential that some of those strategies may be looked at. But right now, I've tried to speak with Shelter the Homeless several times with Lori Hopkins and sort of relay those concerns. I think moving forward, it's just making sure that Councilmember Dugan sits on what's called the Council of Governments, which is all the cities throughout the valley in a specific meeting. And he's been advocating at that level for other cities to make them aware that, look, other people need to step up to the plate here. It's just, you can see from the perspective of a mayor of, say, Sandy or Riverton, there's not a lot of incentive for them to just say, oh, sure, we'll take bring a shelter over here. So I think there needs to be more sort of direction for that from the state level. And I'm hopeful that Mr. Niederhauser's office is taking sort of our concerns to heart. Hopefully that got to the heart of your question.
Yeah, and it looks like Derek wants to chime in, or maybe from the state. I just want to do and Joel, when the homeless resource centers were cited a couple of years ago, that was a decision I believe the mayor and the city council were involved in. It was a tough decision. It created a lot of outcry, but it was a decision made locally. It really felt that this decision about the overflow shelter was something that just kind of dropped in on Salt Lake, and no one knew who made the decision and how it was made. And I know with these centers, you can't put it up to a public vote, and you can't do it in a smoke-filled room. You've got to do it somewhere in the middle. And it didn't seem like that happened. And Derek and Joel, can you let us know, is this that there have been some changes the way the state is running homeless services with the new homelessness committee or council? Is there any way that this could change in the future, or is this going to be a little bit outside of Salt Lake's hands when these decisions are made?
So there's so much to be said on this matter. This was a surprise to me. I mean, I represent this neighborhood, but my business is a block away from the Brooklyn Avenue shelter. I was surprised to learn that this facility had been chosen as an overflow facility for our brothers and sisters sleeping on the street. And so it was a little frustrating to me because I'm a stakeholder as an adjacent business owner and a stakeholder as an elected official. And this was completely off my radar. And I think that was one thing that feels not right to me, because I acknowledge that we need to have overflow facilities in our region. I would prefer that not all of them are built or constructed here in Salt Lake City, but quite frankly, Salt Lake City has been doing the work for this population forever. And so, we're used to it in some ways, right? I think what we're not used to are decisions sort of happening in the middle of the night like this. There's a number of reasons why. I don't need to go into the technicalities now, but what I will say is that after this happened, we had a great meeting with Wayne Niederhauser and a number of other individuals who are involved with homeless services at the state level. And I have currently opened a bill file for the 2022 general session that will focus on a bit of a patch to the decision-making of siting facilities. Because one thing that's clear is that there's a lack of clarity around whether or not the decisions of the Salt Lake County Coalition to End Homelessness and even the state level committee, whether or not these are noticing their meetings appropriately and what kind of public engagement they are not doing. For instance, we need to tighten the structure around that a little bit. So I've got some staff working on this right now. Some of the details are forthcoming for the 2022 general session, but I was a part of the decision when we broke up the Rio Grande facility and made the move toward a scattered site model. I was a relatively new council member at the time and burned through all of what little political capital we had, because we believe that this scattered site model was the right approach for homeless services in our region. At the end of the day, like I said earlier, Salt Lake City cannot continue to be the only city that steps up to help address this matter. I know that Mill Creek has stepped into this a little bit. Midvale over the years, they've back in the day, Mayor Sagini was really generous and stepped forward to provide a homeless shelter for families. And so we just need other jurisdictions in the valley and quite frankly statewide to step up. I saw a question in the chat about camping at the park, but camping is an issue that we confront citywide along the Jordan River, of course, along various rail tracks. Just pockets of our city experience camping more so than others, for sure. I support more enforcement on our camping ordinance, but we cannot do that until we have enough facilities online to take in people who are currently living on the street. And so, I say this to emphasize that this is a complicated matter, right? That we need overflow facilities, and that's what the VOA is trying to solve for with this Brooklyn Avenue overflow shelter. Yet at the same time, we need communities to be the ones driving these decisions. So unfortunately, what we find ourselves in right now is a situation where the decision has been made. And unless, VOA and Shelter the Homeless decide to dial back their effort and put a pause on this, we are going to have an overflow shelter on Brooklyn Avenue. And so at this point, we have to figure out where the community can insert themselves. And that is likely through the permitting process at the city level. And so anyway, I support Councilmember Mono and his colleagues on the city council if they decide to pursue a change in the allowable table for a conditional use. At the end of the day, though, we do need overflow facilities, and we need to figure out how we can get them online as soon as possible.
So,
Thank you, Senator Kitchen. Joel, yeah, go ahead.
I am opposed to the conversion of the current detox center on 252 Brooklyn Avenue to an overflow shelter. I am in favor of finding 300 overflow beds inside and outside of Salt Lake County, and those are not mutually exclusive conditions. I have not received any complaints, perhaps Darren and some of the people in Ballpark have, about the current VOA detox. Part of the reason people may not be complaining about detox is when individuals get to the point that they go, I have a problem, I have an addiction problem, and they go in the shelter and they go in a detox facility, they don't get to come and go. They go in the building and they're in the building for at least a week, if not longer. I am in favor of the VOA finding a building that offers them to growing there. We have many of our friends and neighbors and loved ones who have been addicted. No one gets up in the morning and goes, hey, I think I want to be an addict. I mean, these things happen to them. It's because of lax doctors. It's because of pharmaceutical companies making billions of dollars off making opioids and making sure they're widely distributed. There's so many reasons why people get addicted, and we need to have compassion for them. My issue is more with the homeless shelter, that with several weeks when it's cold, than what they're going to do with it the rest of the year. So I spoke to the associate director of the new state homelessness council, who works directly underneath Wayne Niederhauser, who told me that, well, it might look a lot like the Wiegand Center. It might be a place where people can come and go and have access to all these resources, which means people coming and going all the time. The last discussion I had with her, she said, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be an easy entry. We could prioritize for certain people, and then it becomes more like a regular shelter in which not everyone goes in. From a state perspective, it's a good idea to have 100 more beds. From a city perspective, it's not a good idea to have it at Brooklyn Avenue. It's not a good idea to concentrate. And this is what's happening on Brooklyn Ave is a microcosm of what's happening in the state. Is that some places get known for taking it and then they get it. I have heard Wayne Niederhauser in multiple meetings in the last 2 months. I believe that he is committed to making homelessness a state effort. Okay, I believe he doesn't want it to be a Salt Lake City homeless effort. I believe that there are others who are committed, but we can't let other people off the hook. If Salt Lake City picks up another emergency shelter this winter, and there's a mayor in this county in another city who's thinking about girding up their loins and saying, you know what, I'm going to my city council and going, we need to take our turn this winter. And the Salt Lake City says, oh, that's okay, we'll do it in 2022. In 2023, a lot of those mayors are going to be up for re-election, and they aren't going to be willing to do it. So, we need to, this is tough love. I am proud that I'm a resident of Salt Lake City. I am proud that we put so much effort in helping the people who are unsheltered. I want more people in Utah to feel proud like I feel proud.
Gotcha. Any follow-up from our panelists about that? Any other issues? Derek?
Yeah, I'll just say finally, I mean, I'm not in favor of Brooklyn Avenue. I just see the process and how it rolled out, and I'm not sure exactly how to stop it at this point. So I'm opposed to more facilities, especially as we concentrate them in neighborhoods. Because if you look at the 14th South, Paramount, and 3rd West facility, you have the Gail Miller facility over on 7th, plus the youth shelter just west on 9th. I mean, we're recreating the ecosystem that we sought to, break up a couple of years ago. So I think I'm more frustrated with the lack of clarity from various decision makers and the fact that this was done basically behind closed doors. That being said, I think Representative Briscoe brought forward a number of really important points. I can't imagine a mayor in Salt Lake County or even outside of Salt Lake County stepping forward this winter or even in the future. I feel like at this point, we need a state law that directs how we are going to manage our winter population of people who are living in the rough. And we need to compel municipalities and other regions to step into this game because no politician, quite frankly, is going to willingly, put themselves in that position. We need to compel them to do so. And so that's my political thought on the matter, which is, we need to push Sandy and Draper and West Valley to step into the game in a meaningful way. And they're not going to do it unless we compel them.
Thank you. Yeah, this is all really good. We're kind of getting into a bigger conversation than just what happened, but what can happen next. And I was listening to that Executive Appropriations Committee meeting about a week or so ago when everyone thought they were going to vote on it. And they didn't vote on it. And there was a decision that didn't have any deciders. It was there. Unlike the homeless resource centers where you could actually know who made the decision and where that came from. And it was a much more understandable process. This is really opaque. And so Senator Kitchen, if you've got legislation to kind of peel that back a little bit and see what's going on, I think that would be something that would be helpful. And then what municipalities can do either to bring more cities together on this or to give cities a little bit more options or leeway when these decisions are made. So, and Representative Briscoe, I remember back at the Sugar House meeting we were at together in the basement of the Sprague Library, where one of the comments was, well, let's send all the unsheltered people out to the West Desert. That things can get hot and things can get extremely emotional and downright cruel when we're talking about unsheltered populations. And the truth is that we have people that need a place to stay and we don't have enough beds. And there's work that needs to be done on this issue.
I'm Jason. Thank you so much for that memory. My son lives in Portland, Oregon. If we think we have a homeless issue, we have nothing. Speaking to Andrew Johnston, who's been appointed by Mayor Mendenhall, he told me last month that, 400 beds Salt Lake City is looking for, Salt Lake County. He said, Seattle's looking for 6,000 beds. I'm on the Housing Affordability Commission for the state of Utah, 45 to 50,000 units short in Utah, Oregon, 150,000 units short. None of these issues are Utah specific, but we live here in these neighborhoods. I mean, Liberty Park is our community park. Brooklyn Avenue is where many people live. But people across the country are dealing with opioid addiction, homelessness, overpriced housing. We need a national effort and we need a local effort. And I'm here locally and that's where I'm working on it.
Thanks, Joel. Hey, Jason, if it's okay, Amy Hawkins popped something into the questions and I'm not sure if everyone attending can see it. It's important to just remember that the Brooklyn Avenue site is a proposal for the winter of 2022 to 23. So that leaves two questions open. I mean, one, there's still some time. So there may be one of the main reasons why I felt comfortable being vocally opposed to it is because I think there's still time to replace that with a more suitable site. If it's not the overflow shelter for this winter, but that also begs the question of where the overflow shelter for this winter is being planned. And I don't know that anyone on this call knows that. So that's another, just that's another thing to keep our eye out for, because this is not the plan for this current winter. The VOA wouldn't be able to leave their current facility until sometime next year. So
yeah, thank you for bringing
we'll
it
have
up
more
there. I
sites
think
to be
with 2 years
discussing.
ago, it was at the Bicycle Center in downtown Sugar House was where the overflow shelter was. Last year, I believe, was the Airport Inn.
Airport Inn, yeah.
Out west of the city. And so, yeah, this year it seems like a perennial hot potato. It'd be really nice if we could figure something out that was systematic or permanent.
Yeah, actually, in the meeting that Councilmember Dugan was in, the mayors were like, well, maybe we'd take it for 1 year if it rotated every year. So we may get other cities to participate if it is a hot potato, but that seems very expensive.
I wanted to shift to a related issue, and this was a question I sent to Senator Kitchen, but we can open it up to everyone. And that deals with Utah's landlord and tenant laws. We're talking about homelessness, but a lot of people are forced into homelessness when they fall behind on their rent and they're evicted. And Utah has some pretty strict laws, treble damages, 3 days and out, things that make it very difficult if you are a tenant who's struggling. Derek, what have you seen at the legislature? And I want to open up to everyone as well in terms of any attempt to reform this. Is it a contributing factor to this homelessness issue that we're struggling with? And should we be thinking about it, at the front of the pipe as opposed to at the back of the pipe?
Short answer to that is yes, we should be thinking about the front and the end of the pipe on this matter. We just got census data that show that Utah is, exploding, right? We're bursting at the seams in terms of population. Historically low vacancy rate. It's been that way for a number of years. So right now we just have such limited supply on housing. It's driving up the cost of living, and we have stagnant wages as well. And so I think a lot of people are feeling really crunched right now. I hear about it every single day. The issue that you spoke to, you have 72 hours. A landlord can kick you out of your house in 72 hours, right? Like that's not nearly enough time for me or many of the people I know to relocate themselves. And so, that's a real issue, quite frankly. There was a policy passed this last year by Representative Judkins in the House, a Republican, that required the disclosure of various fees from the landlord to the tenant, which that's a really good step for tenants, right? In terms of transparency and disclosing costs. Yet at the same time, we don't have many protections elsewhere, so I think we have all these great ideas about rent control and how we can stabilize the market a little bit, but bluntly, Utah state law currently prohibits any sort of rent control. So that ties the hands of the county or council member Darren Mono or anybody else that wants to put forward a progressive idea to get rent under control in cities like Salt Lake. So that's a real problem. What you're hearing is, you got to keep in mind, the legislature is dominated by development interests. And so the focus from a lot of individuals has been on how do we support developers? And that's not always a bad thing, but it can't be the only solution, right? We do need to develop new housing. We need housing types at all levels. We need, homes for people to purchase. We need condos. We need rental units at the higher level of the area median income, and then we need deeply affordable transitional housing for people who are escaping, homelessness or exiting incarceration and looking to find stability perhaps for the first time in their life. And so we certainly do need housing types of all kinds of housing types to be brought online. And with our exploding population, we do need to develop new streams of income and revenue to make that happen. I will say Salt Lake City has done a great job over the last decade or so at addressing affordable housing. You saw the news earlier this week from the mayor's office and the redevelopment agency, putting a little bit of money out there to try and lure further development of affordable housing. When I was on the council, we set aside almost $30 million for affordable housing, right? We keep doing whatever we can. We've increased zoning. We make it so that it's easier for us to add density and to mix the uses throughout the city and make it more viable to develop housing. Salt Lake City's done a great job. It's not Salt Lake City that is the problem, right? We're talking about these other municipalities along the Wasatch Front that are also bursting at the seams, yet at the same time have this deep allergy toward any sort of density. And so, there are problems, certainly, but if we're going to really wrap our arms around homelessness in any meaningful way, not only do we need to add housing to our stock, to our inventory, but we've got to fully fund the wraparound services that allow people to be treated for substance use disorder, addiction, or mental and behavioral issues, perhaps throughout the duration of their life. And so housing is the main issue when we're talking about homelessness, but there's a lot of other matters that need to be tied into this as well. So that was a little bit of a winding answer. So I don't know if I got to the meat and potatoes of what you're talking about, but we'll just leave it there for now.
Well, that was great because, right, a house is 4 walls and a roof, right? But it's in that you can build those, but keeping people in that housing, you got to deal with some of the other issues that cause them to lose it. Representative Briscoe, I know that you have worked on some legislation around helping tenants. Do you see any appetite in the House for doing more, or do we just have to build more housing? Is that really the only way that we're going to get around this issue?
No, we can't build our way out of it. We do need to build more housing. 2 years ago, over 30,000 units in Utah were started, approved, platted for, which set a record. I really love the fact that when I listen to Wayne Niederhauser talk, he talks about why people are on the street, and he talks about people who suffered trauma in their lives. He talks, there's such a, it's more than just giving a person a key to an apartment. It's providing them with all kinds of support that help them do all kinds of things. Every person on the street is there for a particular reason. And a significant percent of people who go to homeless shelters are there for less than 6 months, and they don't see them back within 3 years. So they literally had a crisis, didn't have enough family support, they got helped. I'm going to bring Mohammed Bayed in. We know that when families don't move, their kids do better in school. There is a community. As a community, we should be moving closer and closer to making housing a right. We have made public education a right. The US Constitution says nothing about people being educated. Now, when the Northwest Ordinance was passed, they did say survey the land, and in every township set aside one section for sale for the support of houses. Utah got 3 sections. So not too long after, just before the Constitution was adopted, and immediately after, there were grand experiments going on in states. But we're getting closer to saying people have a right to health insurance. We're edging ever closer. We need to get closer and closer to people need a place to sleep. The landlord-tenant laws are busted. They are skewed. Maybe I'll run legislation saying, I spent a few years trying to help people downtown Salt Lake who were homeless get housing. And I had a series of questions. You've just been in jail. Do you have a felony? Yes. Is it over in 5 years? No. Shoot. If it's less than 5 years, there's all these apartment complexes in Utah that will not even take an application. I think that's dead wrong. I think you ought to have to look a man or woman in the eye and look at what's on the paper and talk to that person and make a judgment about whether you're willing to do that. I know that there's efforts going on right now to look at some more humane landlord-tenant laws. I'm looking at some homelessness legislation. So especially, I think what's going to happen in the next few months with people all of a sudden lacking support for rent or eviction, I think the next 3 or 4 or 5 months could be awful.
Thank you, Joel. And anytime you can bring in the Northwest Ordinance into a conversation, it makes me extremely happy. Abraham Lincoln at Cooper Union. All right. Mohammed, I wanted to allow you to answer that question, but then also maybe diverge into how K-12 education has changed since COVID-19 has started. We were all on notebooks and laptops last year. Now we're back in the classroom. What are the persistent changes that you've seen? But feel free first to riff on what Joel was talking about there.
Thank you, Representative Briscoe, for bringing that up, because it's very painful when I hear that we have families with kids, school-age kids, and they're homeless. I mean, you can only imagine the effect on both the children and their parents. Here are the parents who wants to, send their kids to public school so that they can get a great education. But also here are the students who feel like they do not belong because they feel like they do not have a place to live in. So this is a struggle. And also we're talking about the affordable housing. Unfortunately, our district is seeing this is in terms of school. Our district is seeing a drastic decrease in minority enrollments in classes because families just cannot afford anymore to be in Salt Lake City. So they move. And we can only imagine, I mean, Utah is already one of the third worst in terms of school funding, sadly to say. And now for Salt Lake City, the more fewer students we have, that's fewer funding we can have. And we know that we have older schools. We have a population that is so diverse that we need so many resources out there to make sure that, every kid, no matter who they are, no matter where they came from, no matter what the skin of their color, religion, or belief, whatever it might be, they need to make sure that they receive an equitable education. And that is the issue we're still struggling with here in Utah, sadly to say. There is no reason we should have Highway 15 dividing west from east. There is no reason why I should say on the east branch, we do see amazing programs and teachers are so involved. But then the moment you cross, I-15 on the other side, then you start seeing a whole, it's like a whole new world. And that's what we're trying to correct, especially now having a very optimistic and very, very energetic, actually, superintendent who's actually, we're so excited. We got so many things out there in line that are happening right now. And to circle back to the question about K-12 and what COVID has done. All right. COVID, my goodness. It's the only democratic, know what to say. So, seriously, I mean, it's that kind of a pandemic. It's just it does not distinguish between who you are, where you're from, period. And however, it actually has shown what the community has. I've never, ever, ever dreamed that I would see a community so divided, for the purpose of sending the kids to school in person or for masking. That's not, for the families who are listening, we all come at the end, we're all agreeing that the reason we are here, the reason the school district is existing, the reason that every single person out there that is working every day is for the sake of students to gain a better education. These students are not just numbers, not just names in the classroom, not just a statistic or a data. These are the future of this country. These are the future. They are the ones we are going to be passing on the torch and telling them, carry on with that American dream. Carry on, continue with it. And the only way for us to be able to make that happen is if we continue to fix the systems that are currently, sadly to say, causes a certain systematic racism in a way that we see within our society. COVID-19, I hope the families that are listening here today, it does not matter if you agree or not agree with your neighbor. Please, please know that everyone is doing their best to make sure that the children are taught well. That's one. Two, in terms of what COVID has done as well, it actually has opened the new doors for education. Now we have the virtual academy, as I mentioned earlier. 200 plus students are enrolled in that. That just like speaks about what the future of education is going to be. And it is reality of where we are. The world is globalized, economy is globalized, education is globalized. So thank goodness we have functioning internet that can help us make that happen. So that's one thing. And I want to go back to the homelessness. To everyone that is listening here today, there is no good policy out there, sadly to say, to fix what we have going on. There is one thing that I'm very certain of, is human's heart. If you are driving, if you have extra jackets in your house and you're driving around, you see a homeless person who's just like out there cold, take it upon yourself and give him a blanket or give him a jacket you have. Let's just use our human side so we can help, those who are, unfortunately, the circumstances has placed them outside. And that's like, to me, the human side is the best solution we can do at this point.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thanks for addressing that. And, I want to end our meeting. We've just got a minute or two left with asking each of our panelists to describe one issue that we haven't talked about that is coming up, or is that an important issue for Salt Lake City or for ELPCO residents to consider? It's kind of like the McKinsey question, what keeps you up at night, right? So we'll start with Darren, if that's okay, and then walk our way through. Just quickly, one issue that we should be thinking about or watching for.
Redistricting. So the state is currently redistricting, and as soon as that's done, the city will be redistricting. And I just wanted to put a plug out. We're going to try to create the state has, I should probably not steal the thunder from Derek or Joel if they're going to talk about it, but the state has an independent redistricting commission, which unfortunately doesn't have control over the maps, but gets the opportunity to submit what are supposed to be as non-biased maps as possible that the legislature must look at and consider, I believe. You all can correct me if I'm not entirely correct on that, but the city we're going to create a commission as well. At least that's the discussion we're having right now. We're figuring out exactly how to do that. And so we'll be looking for a representative from every council district to serve on that redistricting committee and help us make our maps as equitable as possible. We know that there are some community councils that are split between two districts, and that's perhaps one goal that we might want to rectify so that we have one person representing each district, each community council, or different things like that. So if anyone is interested in that, please reach out to me. But that's something that is coming up soon that will be important.
Awesome. Thanks. Great to know what the city is thinking about. Probably a little bit more open than what the state might do. Senator Kitchen.
I'll just amplify what Councilmember Mono mentioned on the redistricting. We have the Independent Commission. This is the first time ever that Utah has an independent body that is tasked with collecting public input and drawing maps based on communities of interest, right? We don't want Moab divided down the middle. We don't think West Jordan, a city with over 100,000 people, should be split into 3 Senate districts, right? It's not right that Mill Creek, Midville, and Holiday all have a different congressional representative, right? They're essentially the same community. So I would encourage everybody to, I'm your legislator, Joel, Representative Briscoe here is your legislator. We're on your side when it comes to following the Independent Commission. But if you can, put pressure on the legislature broadly to pay reverence, quite frankly. They need to pay reverence to the Independent Commission's maps because they are going to be drawn with the most, I think, fair lens. They will not be considering incumbent politicians because at the end of the day, politicians like myself and Representative Briscoe, we should not be choosing our voters. It needs to be the other way around. The voters choose who represent them. And so the Independent Commission is made up of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, all appointed by the legislature and the governor's office. And they're really upstanding members of our community, from former Supreme Court justices to former members of Congress, like Rob Bishop, and former legislators on the right, like Lyle Hilliard. These are going to be good maps. And I think it's incumbent upon the legislature to follow these maps. I'll leave with one other thing that's unrelated to redistricting. Something that keeps me up at night is our airshed and our water. We've already talked about this a little bit, but perhaps you heard the Radio West interview with the biologist, Dr. Baxter. It's dire out there at the Great Salt Lake. So much of our quality of life is dependent on the health of that very, very fragile ecosystem. So, there's some stuff in the works right now legislatively, but this is not something that can be solved with a silver bullet policy. It comes down to conservation and making sure that we have more water flowing into the Great Salt Lake. I'm happy to talk more about this. I'm currently planning a town hall for next Wednesday. I'll make sure that Jason has information on that and can share that outward if anybody would like to tune in. But like I said, this next Wednesday, I'll have some more information focused primarily on water and air. And so thank you so much for having me tonight. I want to congratulate my colleagues for their presentations, and I appreciate all the information and the hard work that you put into your community. And I'm so honored to serve in the legislature and look forward to engaging with you as the session approaches this January.
Great, thank you, Senator. Joel, what is something we should be thinking about that maybe we're not?
My son called me from Portland this summer. It was 117 degrees. The same week it was 117 degrees in Portland. It was 114 degrees above the Arctic Circle in East Siberia. The entire state of Utah was in drought for weeks. Everything that the meteorologists, science, and climate scientists have been telling us is going to happen is present today. It's not a future event. We're getting less snow in the winter. We're getting more rain. We're getting hotter temperatures in the summer. And we're getting billions, literally billions of dollars from the federal government. And I hope we use that to build for resilience in the future.
Thank you, Joel. Maybe I should have asked this at the beginning so we all don't get depressed right at the end of the night. But Mohammed, Bade, round us out with something that's on your mind that we.
Okay, what awake? Oh my goodness, where should I start? No, just one thing that keeps me awake is the fact that when I get up in the morning and I know I have enough food, and I think about how many kids out there who do not have food and still have to go to school. When I'm in my bed and covered with a nice comfy blanket, and so I think about other kids and their families who are like in a very close living conditions, and maybe some of them are sharing the same blanket, or some of them are out in a shelter. Those are the things that keep me awake. What keeps me awake is the kids who fell behind in school due to COVID. I mean, I know we're so grateful for the federal money that has come in, close to $40 million, and those are actually going to be used solely to make sure that everything that COVID has affected, that we are taking care of, because we do have money assigned for like unfinished learning, educational technology, mental health, wellness of both the students and the teachers. It's just like so many amazing things. So those are the things that keep me awake. However, I always say there is light at the end of the tunnel. This is what makes me happy, is the fact that we're all here sitting, because this is what I love about America, is that we can sit down, we can work together, and we can come up with some solutions. Maybe temporary, but it's better than nothing.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here tonight. I echo what Derek said about appreciating your time and your thought into your answers. So Councilmember Mono, Senator Kitchen, Representative Briscoe, School Board Member Baid, I'm not quite sure how to say that. But really, this has been a unique experience, I think, to have everyone here for this kind of meeting. I hope it worked. We might do it again, well, based on feedback we hear from our members. But thank you for taking the time. I want to just mention a couple quick things before we round out. That is, we'll have our Salt Lake City Council District 5 debate next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. Unfortunately, we don't have a chat where I could put the registration link in. But if you go to the ELPCO Facebook page, or if you get our newsletter, We'll be putting posters up about it. It'll be an online Zoom webinar just like this with the 5 candidates running for Salt Lake City District 5, the City Council. So that'll be next Wednesday at 7. And I also wanted to say we'll have one more ELPCO meeting for sure this fall, next October 28th. You can wear your costume if you like. I think we're doing Star Wars in my family this year. So to see what my kids want me to be, probably Grogu. No, that's actually the baby. But we'll have a meeting. We'll hopefully have the mayor if she can attend. Otherwise, we'll fill it up with some interesting things. And of course, the election is November, I think, 2nd or 3rd. I can't remember the exact date. Darren, do you remember what it is? Is it the 2nd or 3rd? The 2nd.
It's the 2nd.
And it'll be mail-in.
Can't wait for it to be here either.
You'll get your ballot in early October. It's mail-in, and we're doing ranked choice voting. So watch for some information from ELPCO about what ranked choice voting means. Basically, it means candidates have to be nice to each other. So that's one thing about it. So any parting words from our panelists before we are adjourned?
Thank you, Jason, for
Jason.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, everyone. Keep your heads up. Things will continue to work in the right direction.
Well, thank you all for being here. I do want to say there's one final comment that came in. Someone wondering if I'm going to be a whale or a gnome for Halloween. Those of you in ELPCO know all about that. I will say that we'll have some announcements in the next couple of weeks about the 900 South Roundabout project. That is moving forward. So we'll be back into whale versus gnome very soon. Maybe just in time for Halloween. But we'll see you next October 28th, if not sooner, on social media and hopefully in person as we run into each other around town. So thanks all for being here.